Welcome back, by the way.
Thank you.
I suppose I should do that. We should welcome you back because you missed last week. That's okay, though, because we had our wonderful intern, Mason Mohan, come and sit in for you. Mason, if you're watching, it was nice to be with you. I'm glad Joanna's back. But it was nice to sit in with you. Welcome, everyone else, though. We will introduce here while folks join. I know we've just hit the lunch hour, but thank you for joining us for our Unauthorized Caucus weekly live stream. I'm seeing all the notifications running here and folks joining. And we appreciate you sitting down with us and letting us have these conversations with you. It's fun. And honestly, every time we always kind of scramble on Thursday morning and think, what are we going to talk about? What are we going to talk about? And then it just starts pouring out all of this stuff that we've been talking about and all these issues we've been writing about. And we're like, oh, well,
we need to keep this down to 20 minutes.
Yeah, how are we going to keep this down to a short amount of time? And just 20 minutes ago, we were thinking, well, what do we do? So it seems like that happens every week, which I guess is good. We're having the conversations here that all of us should be having at home with our families, with friends, with coworkers, because I mean, as you know, I talked about in a press release that just went out just a little while ago, talking about the new assault weapons ban coming through Congress. One of the core tenets that we believe here in Phyllis Schlafly land, all of the organizations connected to Phyllis Schlafly's legacy, is that the government is not the sovereign in America. It's we the people. So at the end of the day, we're the ones who have the ultimate responsibility for making decisions, for knowing what we think, for having these discussions amongst ourselves, because how we guide and move culture and government really ought to come back to us. So each of us should be engaged. And even if politics isn't your thing, you got to know what's going on to go and vote, something we're going to talk about next week. And you have to know what's behind all these issues. So these conversations are important. And we'll leave it there. Thank you for joining us. Like, share, and subscribe. We'll dive right into it, what we've got in mind for today. I'll set that up real quick, and then I'm going to let Joanna take off because I know she had a couple of ideas on this and sent me some articles. But hit the like button, hit the subscribe button and the little notification bell if you're on YouTube. And then also please feel free to share this with a friend right now and tell them to tune in and watch on their lunch hour. We're going to talk about some things that are important and that matter. And getting into it, just a few weeks ago, I was just looking for it here. I spoke with Jordan Henry. The two of us got into what we called the social case for border control, because really what we're witnessing on the southern border, it's not just about politics or economics or anything else. It's about people. Really, there's a humanitarian crisis happening at our border when you look at all of it, but especially when you look at the human trafficking side of it, the drug use side of it, the fact that the cartels are essentially doing whatever they want, shipping people across the border. And we have semi-trucks filled with illegal immigrants crossing the border that are just being left to die. We have people dying across the border. What is it? Did I hear the stat right? Just a couple of weeks ago, it was 2 out of every 60% of women and girls that are trafficked across by the cartels are raped and sexually abused on their way into the United States. This is a humanitarian crisis, make no mistake. So we talked about that a few weeks ago. I'll find that here and link it below while Joanna dives us into today. But we realized this kind of is the big issue that is undergirding all the other issues we're talking about. So next week, as a quick sneak peek, we're going to sit down and talk to you because Missouri's primary is on August 2nd. I know a lot of states have already had their primaries. Some are about to. Municipal elections happen in the spring typically, so they already have. But we're all looking forward to November. How do we sit down and vet candidates, especially some of these things that aren't just on the issue pages, if you even want to trust the issue page on somebody's website? We're going to talk a little bit about that because we're both about to go and vote the following Tuesday. So we're going to cover that. And this issue, the immigration issue, as we're going to cover today, is kind of behind and beneath everything and ought to be talked about a lot and ought to be questioned of our elected officials a lot in the coming weeks as we are facing down the November election. So I'm going to go and find this link, kind of the rehash of what we already talked about. And then Joanna, you want to dive us into a couple of the issues we were talking about and realized, you know what? There's an immigration story in here as well that needs to be talked about and must be remembered.
Sure. So again, thank you all for watching our live stream today. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share this video as well. But the immigration topic is very important. And one thing the president of our organization, Ed Martin, says is that a lot of young people don't like to hear about it. They're not as interested, but this is an issue that will affect them way more. And I consider myself a young person too, so it's going to affect me a lot more as I get older and the next generation coming up after us. So basically what we've done as an organization, if you actually go to phyllisschlafly.com, phyllisschlafly.com. You can search in the search bar immigration, and this is an issue that we talked about a lot. Ed talks about on his radio show. We've written a lot about it too over the years. And then also we have a few places that we like to cite information from, or people that we like to get on Ed's radio show that can keep people up to date on what's going on at our southern border. So one place that we really like is Center for Immigration Studies. So if you want to check out Center for Immigration Studies, you can go to CIS.org. Again, that is CIS.org. We get Todd Bensman on Ed's show, if not every week, every other week. And the border situation is, or the border crisis, which it truly is, can kind of be a daunting and depressing topic. And I mentioned this in past videos where I like the way Todd explains it. It's very approachable, interesting, and helpful, and he doesn't make it all sound doom and gloom, which I appreciate. So definitely check out them.
And he's also, the great thing about Todd is that he's actually the one who's there. He's not reporting on it based on someone else's set of eyes. He is often the guy running around in the middle of the desert, crossing the rivers, interviewing some of these folks. It's him. So when he comes back to it, he's not really giving any opinions that I see most of the time. He's just telling you what's happening and showing you. He was the one there to film it. So that eyewitness account is really pretty powerful and very objective for a lot of folks who kind of may not, or agree with you or us on where the border crisis really is. And
he makes all that information available for you to see again with his writings and videos that he takes. But he actually had an article that came out today, and I shared it with Ryan. It says, "Are Democrats' mayors really just now waking up to the greatest mass migration border crisis in U.S. history?" And we can share that with you all. But basically, he gives some information on how there's been millions of immigrants coming over the border just in the last year. And that is a huge number. We're not talking about thousands. We're talking about millions.
Millions.
Which is overwhelming. And how some of these Democrat mayors are saying how they are a hindrance on their resources. But these are some people who have been encouraging these massive amounts of illegal immigrants to cross the border. So it's one thing I wanted to share.
Yeah. And, one of the things we mentioned was that a lot of the news that's going around here, it's not necessarily on the immigration issue, but as you start to dig into the issue, it really is. We're still talking about the Uvalde school shooting. I mean, as we ought to. But then, the Indiana shooter that was stopped by a 22-year-old carrying a lawful, concealed weapon, that brought up Uvalde all over again. Some comparisons were being made, but something really interesting that came up, and this is another plug, Jack Posobiec at his Human Events Daily podcast, and he works a lot with TPUSA. There's a source you should be following if you're looking for things that aren't being talked about in the mainstream news. Even Fox News, I hate to tell you, is pretty bad at covering a lot of things that ought to be covered. Posobiec was one of the ones really digging in to the reports that are coming out from Texas about Uvalde, some of the internal reports as Texas law enforcement looks at it. And as much as everyone started talking about, the officers, there were 376 to 1. There were, hundreds of law enforcement officers there. Why didn't anyone do anything? One of the things Jack and several other people noticed said, wait a minute. There was confusion over what was even going on because Uvalde Public School District had been locked down, was it 48 times already this academic year? Why? Because of what they refer to as bailouts. A vehicle full of illegal immigrants that had been smuggled across, law enforcement follows them, they're being tracked. All of a sudden, they bail out in a public area and scatter so as to avoid being caught. The school's been shut down nearly 50 times already because Uvalde is placed right between, Eagle Pass and Del Rio. This is the human trafficking corridor along the southern border, the primary spot. So, I mean, not that it excuses or changes, and we don't have to talk about, Uvalde law enforcement response even, but how many officers are standing there wondering, we've already done this 48 times. What's going on? Who's actually in the school? The fact that that's even there and it's not one of the primary parts of this conversation is just incredible. I mean, it needs to be talked about that how much has our immigration and border crisis in Texas and across the whole southern border, how much did that affect the response in Uvalde? The other one that Biden brought up, everyone doubted it to begin with, the 10-year-old girl who was raped and impregnated and couldn't get an abortion, had to be taken across state lines. Well, it comes out, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. There was a 10-year-old girl who was raped and impregnated, and she was raped by a 27-year-old illegal immigrant. So again, here's another issue. If we didn't quite possibly have as much of an issue, just immigrants pouring across the border and being released, would this have even been an issue? Would there have been a young girl who was facing this situation? Is a question that we must ask ourselves. And that's the immigration issue. It's not even abortion, but how they're connected is incredible. Of course, there's another issue altogether. What did we find out? The immigrant was actually marked down on the abortion paperwork also as having been a minor himself, which I might be confused on some of the age levels in our country, but I don't think 27 counts as a minor anywhere. So right there, we bring it back to, so how many other abortion facilities are falsifying things to make sure that we don't have to talk about some of the other issues? It just brought up a whole host of issues. But as we look at this, I mean, immigration is underneath, whether it's guns, abortion, all the things that are hot topics in America. Immigration is there. It's not going away. It affects and is, has a, what's the word? Is it causality, causation? It's one of the causes behind, there's not even a cause, a big connection behind almost everything that's going on. And to your point earlier, we're not talking about, hundreds of thousands or even, tens of thousands, millions of people are pouring into our country, and nothing's being done about it. And frankly, it's not being talked about by a lot of mainstream sources, or at least given the, time that it ought to be.
And when the first I heard about the Uvalde school being locked down at least 48 times this last academic year, the first time I heard that was this week. And I was thinking, one of the first thoughts that came to my mind is that should not be normal for those kids. I cannot imagine being in that school district myself, being a parent, being a family member to those children or to a teacher, and that being, we were locked down again because they were chasing someone who got away from them, an illegal immigrant. When we have schools locked down here in St. Louis, it is all over the news. I hear about it from kids that I'm around that go to the different public schools, and it is a huge deal. But 48 times, no wonder there was some confusion on what was going on inside, and that just makes the situation even sadder.
Yeah, I mean, this is normal life for us, so much to the point that it's not being talked about. It doesn't get covered in the news, but it's normal life so much for a bunch of Texas school kids that their school's locked down 50 times. It happens one more time, but who didn't even realize for how long that it was an active shooter who came to target children, not just that their school was locked down because of something that had happened nearby. So it's really an issue that cannot be let go of. I mean, I know that we come back to this a lot. Phyllis Schlafly did all the time as well. Phyllis was really one of the main voices to point out a long time ago, it's not just illegal immigration, but legal immigration as well, and the levels that we allow and the criteria and everything. This has to be one of our primary concerns as a nation, just for economic sustainability, social sustainability. I mean, if you're integrating people, which obviously America's famous for, we're the melting pot, this has to be done in a lawful and orderly way, and then it's healthy and it's good and it's productive. But when you just pull back the security and open the floodgates of the incentives for folks to come, then it just turns into a mess. And we're seeing that mess play out, whether it's in school shootings, abortions, drug deals, human trafficking and sex trafficking. It's incredible. And it's something that every single one of us should be demanding from our members of Congress, the House and the Senate. What are you doing? What accountability are you demanding from the executive branch? Why are we just letting this go by? Why is this not the first and only thing almost that I hear out of your mouth every single time you have a public platform? I know that there's a lot of issues to cover, guns in America, pro-life in America, but as we've just covered, this is underneath and behind and around and connected to all of them. It's there, and it's such a problem that must be faced. This has to be, I would say, one of our number one criteria when vetting candidates for who ought to and ought not to be voted into or back into office. I'm not a single issue voter, but I do like to prioritize things. And I think this one ought to be really high up there for anyone who cares about all of the issues, economic, social, whatever it is. Immigration is connected to and touching on all of them. And our border is in crisis, and it has to be dealt with.
Yeah. And again, I'm fine with people coming into America, as long as they do it correctly and they go through the right systems. And one thing that they were saying here in different articles I've read or different places is that a lot of the times people will make a promise. Yes, I'm going to go into the city. I'm going to go through all the right channels and do all the things, do the system correctly. I'm going to immigrate into America properly. And then they don't. They just live here and they are a burden on our resources. And that's when it becomes a problem. And this might sound like a very doom and gloom conversation that we're having ourselves. But I think, like Ryan is saying, it is important that we are aware of what's going on, that we are sharing these articles, that we are listening to radio shows or podcasts about this, so we are aware of what's happening and I'm not just turning a blind eye. So that is one thing I'm going to encourage you all, just, read up on this, educate yourself. It's important. You don't need to be scared or anything like that, but that's one thing that I would recommend to you. Read CIS.org. Check out Jack Posobiec. But what would you say is maybe another solution? Maybe not like that we can do ourselves, but that the government could do for immigration?
Well, I think I touched on it, and that's one of the things. It's easy to say, and it is important to say, build the wall, secure the border. But the reality is, and I know this is one thing that Phyllis touched on a lot in her writings, was stop the incentives. When you're allowing people, whether it's the system, the security is lax, or we let you go and then we don't actually ever demand that you come back. If we have such an easy system where you can obtain driver's licenses, you can vote, you can get government handouts and bailouts and money. If all of these things are very accessible, and it's not at least limited to the citizens who are ruled by the laws of our nation and who pay taxes and who, fill in the blanks of everything. If all those incentives are there, man, it doesn't matter how high a wall you build. There are still people who are trying to actively figure out how to get around that to come in. If you stop the incentives, I'm not saying you wouldn't have to build a wall, but that could go a long way to turning a lot of people around who just don't want to come anymore because the benefit to coming is almost gone. Now, it's still America. There's still more economic opportunity, more prosperity, more freedom than a lot of these nations that people are running from. But if you make it a little harder to get because it's actually a citizen based, you put into the system, then you can take out. You abide by the laws and vote. You're one of the people who has some responsibility and skin in the game, then you get the benefits. If we could change that incentive system, or if we could change that system, if we could de-incentivize being here illegally, which I know a lot of people will say, oh, that never happens. It does. It absolutely does. Those incentives are there. If you were to take that away, I think that would do a huge world of difference, just like securing our border. Actually and authentically securing our border would do to stopping not only if we can stop people and turn them back, but how many are actually coming in the first place. Make it incentivized to only be here legally. Otherwise, you're going to have people continuing to pour on to whatever system of security that you build. And that is domestic policy that needs to be dealt with by not only members of Congress, by the executive branch, but by our states as well. What kind of welfare benefits and social safety nets do we have that are being held out there that are incentives for folks to get here illegally? That needs to be cleaned up in a whole new way. And that would go a long way to taking care of or addressing this immigration crisis at the border, I think. And I think Phyllis wrote a lot on that. Well, actually, maybe we should trot that out and send out an email. But I've been posting, by the way, when she's referenced an article, I've referenced a couple. I've been posting them down here below. So whether you're watching this video live or if you're catching up on it later, everything we've talked about is down here in the comments. Go and take a look because there's a lot of things that are very important that we'd like you to keep reading. Maybe send around to some folks who who agree with you and would help us, talk about these issues, or folks who may not be quite there. And you have now an opportunity, some more ammo to talk to someone and say, hey, I've got this information. Would you consider this with me? And let's talk about it. Because like I said, people need to know about this stuff, and people need to apply this information to when they vet a candidate and decide who to send to DC, who to send to your state capital. This is important. And, we can get wrapped up in the pro-life issue or in gun grabbers or, protecting the Second Amendment, the whole Bill of Rights. But this is something that continues to touch every single one of those issues, and it's not going away. And it could quite be the issue that dooms America, frankly. Without sounding too doom and gloom, it's true. We can't let it go amongst all these other issues that come up as flashy objects for us to pay attention to. So
okay. Do we have any questions come in?
No, I saw a few comments, but I didn't see any questions that we necessarily needed to address. However, again, if you're listening to this video after the fact or watching it, email us, info@phyllisschlafly.com or ryan@phyllisschlafly.com. You can get to me directly. We would be glad to work with you, to send you information, to get you resources and links. That's what we're here for. So please take a look below, shoot us an email, like, share, and subscribe. And then also the bonus content, and just in case we get cut off, obviously, ever from our social platforms, not that that ever happens to conservative organizations. Not that it's happened to us.
Yeah, exactly.
No. We Twitter banned a long time ago. I'm proud of it. Go and sign up for our email list. Go to phyllisschlafly.com. Not only can you word search all of these issues that we're talking about, see the writings of Phyllis Schlafly, see the stuff that we have been writing about, obviously, in the years since her death, but sign up for our email list. You'll see the banner across the top. Just shoot us your name and email. We don't do anything with those lists except get you information that you need to know. So go and do that for us, and chew on these issues, and look forward next week and maybe get out your own voting cheat sheet as we bring ours and tell you what logic we apply. We'll talk about it, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone next Thursday for another Unauthorized Caucus.
Yep. See you next week. Same